Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through the massive halls of the Galactic Confederation building. Her human feet made soft sounds on the crystal floor that stretched for miles in every direction. Above her head, the ceiling showed the night sky of 1,000 different worlds. She had walked these halls for 15 years now, and still felt small compared to the giant aliens around her. The Krex warriors stood 12 feet tall with thick armor covering their bodies. Their red eyes glowed like fire, and their voices sounded like thunder when they spoke. The Zilani moved like living water, their blue skin changing colors as they talked. The insect-like hive creatures clicked and buzzed in languages that hurt human ears to hear. Elena reached the main council chamber where today's meeting would happen. As always, she was the only human in the room. The other species had sent their best diplomats, their smartest leaders, their strongest warriors. Humanity had sent Elena and her small team of translators and note-takers. War Marshal Thakmor of Yor. The Krex Empire slammed his massive fist on the table. The sound echoed through the chamber like a bomb going off. The Zilani have stolen our mining rights on Kepler 442. This is an act of war. The Zilani representative, a flowing creature named Feltar, rippled with angry orange colors. The Krex speak lies. That system belongs to the Trade Federation. We have legal documents. Elena watched quietly as the two aliens shouted at each other. Around the circular table, representatives from 40 different species whispered among themselves. Some wanted to support the Krex, others favored the Zilani. Most just wanted the problem to go away so they could focus on their own business. This was Elena's job. For 200 years, humans had served as mediators in the galaxy. When species fought over territory, they called humans. When trade deals went wrong, humans fixed them. When wars threatened to break out, human diplomats found peaceful solutions. The other species liked having humans around for this work. Humans were calm and patient. They did not get angry easily. They were also weak compared to most galactic species. A single Krex warrior could break a human in half with his bare hands. The hive creatures could poison humans just by breathing on them. Even the smallest aliens were stronger or smarter or more dangerous than humans. This made other species trust human mediators. After all, what could weak little humans do to threaten anyone? They had no powerful military. Their technology was basic compared to most galactic civilizations. Their home planet Earth was just another small world on the edge of nowhere. Elena stood up and cleared her throat. The room slowly became quiet. This always amazed her. How quickly the most powerful beings in the galaxy would stop talking to listen to a human. "Thank you," Elena said in her soft voice. "I have studied both claims to the Kepler 442 system. War Marshal Thakmor, your people discovered the system first. This is true. However, Veltar, your people were the first to establish mining operations there. This is also true." Both aliens started to interrupt, but Elena held up her hand. Somehow, this simple human gesture made beings who could destroy planets fall silent. "I propose a solution," Elena continued. "The Krex will maintain territorial control of the system. The Zilani will continue their mining operations. In exchange, the Zilani will pay the Krex 20% of all profits from the mines. The Krex will provide protection for Zilani operations against pirates and other threats." War Marshal Thakmor's red eyes blazed. 20%? That is nothing. We could take the entire system by force? Elena looked at him calmly. "You could try. But then you would have to fight a war against the Trade Federation. Other species would choose sides. Trade routes would be disrupted. Millions would die. And in the end, you might lose everything instead of gaining 20% of something valuable." The War Marshal opened his mouth to argue, but Elena was not finished. "Besides," she said, "the Zilani are excellent miners. You are excellent warriors. Neither of you are good at both jobs. This agreement lets each species do what they do best." She turned to Veltar. "The Trade Federation will pay 20%, but in return you get guaranteed protection and exclusive mining rights. No other species can bid for those mining contracts. You also avoid a costly war that would disrupt your operations across 7 other systems." The two aliens looked at each other. Slowly they began to nod. Around the table, other species murmured their approval. Another human success. Another peaceful solution to what could have been a bloody conflict. As the meeting ended and the aliens filed out, Elena heard their whispered comments. She had heard them thousands of times before. "Useful little creatures, these humans," buzzed a hive diplomat. "So peaceful," rumbled a Krex general. They must come from a very safe world to be so soft. Perfect mediators, clicked an insect ambassador. No ambition of their own, so we can trust them. Elena smiled politely and said nothing. She gathered her notes and walked back through the crystal halls toward the human embassy. Her small team of assistants followed behind her, also quiet. Only when they reached the embassy's secure communication room did Elena's expression change. The polite smile disappeared. Her eyes became cold and calculating. She activated the quantum-encrypted communication system that connected her to every human outpost across the galaxy. "This is Ambassador Vasquez," she said into the microphone. "Daily report from Confederation Central. The Krex-Zilani territorial dispute has been resolved as predicted. Both species accepted the proposed solution. Krex military response patterns match our psychological profiles. Zilani economic priorities confirmed." She paused and looked at her notes. Krex War Marshal Thakmor shows increasing frustration with human mediation. Direct quote, "These soft flesh cowards have never known real war." Intelligence assessment. Krex leadership continues to underestimate human capabilities by approximately 400%. Elena flipped through more pages. Hive Queen Zizith referred to human military as rescue ships and medical frigates. Architectural Council maintains belief that humans are the galaxy's favorite housekeepers. All species continue to view humanity as militarily insignificant. She leaned closer to the microphone. Assessment phase continues on schedule. We now have complete psychological profiles on 47 major species, detailed military capabilities analysis on 31 potential threats, and economic dependency. Maps for the entire Eastern Spiral Arm. Elena looked at her calendar. Timeline update. We are currently in year 187 of the observation period. Projected completion of intelligence gathering phase. 13 more years. Recommendation. Maintain current, peaceful facade. Continue building economic and diplomatic dependencies. Ensure no species suspects human long-term capabilities. She turned off the recording and activated a different communication channel. This one connected directly to Earth, to a building that did not officially exist in a city that most galactic maps did not show. "This is Operative Vasquez reporting to Strategic Command," she said. "The galaxy still sees us as harmless mediators. All species continue to request human diplomatic services, while sharing sensitive military and economic information. Our deep cover intelligence network now has operatives embedded in every major government." Elena's voice became harder. Phase 1 intelligence gathering proceeding perfectly. No alien species suspects that humanity has been conducting the largest espionage operation in galactic history. They trust us because they think we are weak. They tell us their secrets because they believe we are no threat to anyone. She smiled. But this smile was nothing like the polite expression she showed aliens. This smile was cold and sharp, like the smile of a hunter watching prey. "Continue Phase 1 operations," she said. "Maintain peaceful facade at all costs. When the time comes for Phase 2, we will be ready. The galaxy will learn what human patience has been preparing for all these years." Elena ended the transmission and walked to the window. Outside, massive alien ships moved through space, carrying the warriors and diplomats of species that ruled star systems. They all thought they knew what humans were. Weak, peaceful, harmless, mediators who could be safely ignored when real power was discussed. They had no idea how wrong they were. The first warning came at 0347 Galactic Standard Time on what would become known as Revelation Day. Deep space sensors along the outer rim detected massive energy signatures moving through the void between galaxies. The readings were unlike anything in the galactic databases. On the Krex border station Bloodfang, Commander Vexhal stared at his tactical display with growing alarm. Hundreds of objects were approaching from the dark space outside their galaxy. They were huge, each one the size of a small moon, and they were moving fast. "Send alert to Confederation Command," Vexhal ordered his communications officer. "Unknown vessels approaching from extragalactic space. Request immediate support." The response came back within minutes. "All available fleets are being dispatched. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours." Vexhal looked at his sensors again. The unknown objects would reach his position in 30 minutes, across the galaxy. Similar scenes played out at dozens of monitoring stations. The unknown fleet was not approaching from one direction. They were coming from everywhere at once, surrounding the galaxy like hunters closing in on cornered prey. The first contact lasted exactly 18 minutes. The Krex proudly called themselves the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Their battle fleets, had conquered 40 star systems. Their soldiers were trained from birth to fight and die with honor. War Marshal Thakmor commanded over 200 warships from his flagship, the Iron Thunder. When the first alien vessels came out of hyperspace, near the Krek's homeworld, Thakmor was ready for them. "All ships attack formation," he commanded. "Show these invaders what Krek's warriors can do." The Krek's fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma cannons, fusion torpedoes, and kinetic railguns filled space with deadly energy. It was the most devastating barrage in Krek's military history. The alien ships absorbed the attack without even slowing down. These creatures called themselves the Devourers, though the galaxy would not learn this name until later. They were not from any known species. They were something else entirely, a hive mind that consumed everything in its path. Entire star systems were fuel for their endless hunger. The Devourer ships opened like metal flowers, revealing weapons that turned matter into energy, and energy into nothing at all. The Iron Thunder, pride of the Krek's fleet, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next moment there was empty space where it used to be. War Marshal Thakmor had just enough time to send one final message before his flagship was consumed. "They are not ships. They are not weapons. They are something else, something terrible. May the gods help us all." Within 18 minutes, the entire Krek's fleet was gone. The Devourer ships moved toward the populated worlds below like a plague of metal locusts. Similar disasters struck across the outer rim. The proud Zilani defense fleet lasted 22 minutes. The insectoid hive worlds managed to hold out for an hour before their planetary shields collapsed. Even the mighty Architectural Council, with their crystal cities that had stood for 10,000 years, fell silent one by one. Emergency sessions convened at Confederation Central. Desperate messages flooded the communication networks. Every species was calling for help, demanding military support, begging for evacuation assistance. The response was predictable and pathetic. The Zilani Trade Federation immediately sealed their borders. "We must protect our core worlds," their representatives announced. "Each species must defend itself." The Architectural Council began calculating acceptable losses. Their crystal computers worked day and night to determine which worlds could be sacrificed to save their civilization. The Hive Queens pulled their fleets back to defend only their most important colonies. "The outer worlds are already lost," they buzzed through their translators. "We must preserve the species." Even the smaller civilizations followed the same pattern. Ships that could have been used for evacuation instead carried wealthy refugees to safety. Fleets that could have fought the invaders instead retreated to protected systems. Only one species responded differently. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force," came the broadcast on all emergency frequencies. "We have received your distress calls. Human fleets are moving to intercept the hostile forces. Estimated arrival time, 4 hours. In the Confederation Council chambers, the remaining representatives stared at the communication display in confusion. Admiral Sarah Chen? The galaxy had never heard of any human military officer with that rank. Humans did not have admirals. They had diplomatic corps commanders and medical fleet supervisors and rescue ship captains. They did not have military leaders who commanded battle fleets. "There must be some mistake," said Veltar, the Zilani representative. "Humans do not have a defense force. They have humanitarian ships and hospital vessels." The response came immediately. "Negative, Confederation Central. This is Admiral Chen commanding the Terran Third Fleet. We are en route to engage the hostile forces. Recommend all civilian ships clear the combat zone immediately." Third Fleet? The aliens looked at each other in bewilderment. If humans had a third fleet, what had happened to the first and second? Where had these ships come from? How had an entire human military force appeared from nowhere? The answer came when the human ships dropped out of hyperspace near the besieged world of Kepler 186. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as vessels unlike anything they had ever seen emerged from the blue-white flash of faster-than-light travel. These were not the familiar human medical ships with their white hulls and red crosses. These were not the small diplomatic vessels that carried human ambassadors between worlds. These were predators. The lead ship alone was larger than most space stations. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, covered with weapon systems that looked both elegant and terrifying. Smaller ships flanked it on all sides, destroyers, cruisers, carriers, each one bristling with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything the galaxy had developed. But it was not just the ships that shocked the watching aliens. It was how they moved. Human vessels did not lumber through space like the massive Krex dreadnoughts. They did not drift gracefully like Zilani trade ships. They moved like a pack of wolves, each ship perfectly coordinated with the others, responding to threats and opportunities with lightning speed. The Devourer ships that had swept aside the Krex fleet so easily suddenly found themselves facing something completely different. Human weapons did not simply fire at targets, they adapted. They learned. They found weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. "This is Admiral Chen to all Confederation forces," came the calm voice over the communication channels. "We are engaging the hostile fleet. Recommend you observe and learn. This is how humans fight when we stop being diplomatic." The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Devourer ships that had seemed unstoppable were nothing but floating debris. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel, but the real shock came when the aliens started analyzing the human tactics. Every move the human ships made showed intimate knowledge of Devourer capabilities. Every weapon they used was perfectly designed to counter specific threats. Every strategy they employed was based on detailed intelligence about their enemy. How had humans known exactly what to expect from an enemy that had never been seen before? The answer was terrifying in its simplicity. Humans had not just been preparing for this specific threat. They had been preparing for everything. For 2 centuries, while serving as peaceful mediators, they had been studying every possible enemy and developing countermeasures for each one. The Devourers were just the first test of human military capabilities, and the galaxy was beginning to realize that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been carefully constructed lies. As Admiral Chen's fleet moved to engage Devourer forces at the next besieged system, her final transmission reached. "Every corner of galactic space. For 200 years you treated us like harmless pets. You forgot that the deadliest hunters are the ones that look peaceful until they decide to kill you. Class is in session, Galaxy. Time to learn what human patience has been building toward all these years." The intelligence report started flooding in 3 days after the first human fleet engagement. What the galaxy discovered made every species re-examine everything they thought they knew about their peaceful human mediators. War Marshal Thakmor sat in his emergency command bunker on the Krex homeworld, staring at classified documents that his surviving intelligence officers had compiled. His hands shook as he turned each page. Everything he was reading seemed impossible, but the evidence was overwhelming. "They knew," he whispered to his aide, Commander Vortal. "By the gods of war, they knew everything." The first document showed detailed schematics of Krex military vessels. Every armor thickness, every weapon placement, every structural weakness was mapped with perfect accuracy. The humans had not obtained this information through spying or hacking. They had been given access during joint military exercises that were supposedly about rescue operations and medical assistance. "Remember 5 years ago?" Thakmor asked his aide. "When we invited human medical ships to participate in our fleet training exercises? We thought we were being generous, letting the weak humans learn from superior Krex military tactics." Vortal nodded slowly. "The humans said they needed to understand our ship designs to provide better medical support to wounded Krex warriors." "Medical support?" Thakmor laughed bitterly. "They were studying our weapons, our armor, our tactics. Every medical consultation was actually a detailed analysis of how to destroy our ships most efficiently." The second document was even more disturbing. It contained psychological profiles of every major Krex leader, including Thakmor himself. The analysis was frighteningly accurate. It predicted exactly how Krex commanders would respond to different types of attacks, what tactics they would use, what mistakes they would make under pressure. "Look at this." Thakmor pointed to a section with his name at the top. "They knew I would try to ram enemy ships if my weapons failed. They knew I would sacrifice smaller vessels to protect my flagship. They knew I would never retreat, even when retreat was the smart choice." The document was signed by Ambassador Elena Vasquez and dated 6 months before the Devourer invasion. Vortal was reading a different section. "Sir, look at this economic analysis. They have detailed records of every trade agreement we have signed, every resource we import, every shipping route we use. They know exactly how to cut off our supply lines and starve our military of the materials needed to build new ships." Similar intelligence discoveries were happening across the galaxy. The Zilani Trade Federation found that humans had copies of every secret business contract, every private negotiation, every hidden financial arrangement. Information that the Zilani thought was completely secure had been flowing to human intelligence services for decades. The insectoid hive queens made an even more disturbing discovery. The cultural exchange programs that had brought human anthropologists to study hive society were actually intelligence operations. Every human scientist who had lived among the hives had been trained to identify military installations, communication, networks, and leadership structures. The humans have been conducting the largest espionage operation in galactic history, Queen Zesth reported to the Emergency Hive Council. Every diplomatic mission was also a spy mission. Every trade negotiation included intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange was designed to map our weaknesses. But the most shocking revelation came when the aliens started examining human activities during their years as mediators. Every peace treaty that humans had helped negotiate contained subtle clauses that benefited human strategic interests. Every trade agreement created economic dependencies that could be exploited. Every diplomatic solution left human colonies in better positions than before. The humans had not been neutral mediators. They had been playing a game so complex that no other species had even realized they were game pieces. On the architectural homeworld of Christos Prime, the Council of Builders gathered in their great crystal hall to analyze human construction projects throughout the galaxy. What they found defied belief. The human embassy on Vega 7, reported Builder Prime Resta, his crystal form flashing with alarmed colors. We designed it ourselves as a gift to show our friendship with humanity. But look at these structural analyses. The holographic display showed the embassy from different angles. To most observers, it looked like a beautiful building that fit perfectly with the local architecture. But when viewed from a military perspective, it was something else entirely. It is a fortress, whispered Builder Coleman. Every decorative element serves a defensive purpose. The gardens provide clear fields of fire. The artistic sculptures are actually sensor arrays. The entire building can be converted into a military stronghold within hours. Resta activated another display. It gets worse. The embassy is not just defensible, it is positioned to overlook our primary spaceport, our main communications center, and our military headquarters. From their cultural center, humans can observe everything important that happens on our world. Similar discoveries were being made throughout the galaxy. Human settlements that seemed random were actually strategically placed to control important shipping routes. Human research stations were positioned to monitor military activities. Even human tourist facilities were built in locations that provided intelligence value. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity had not just been preparing for the Devourer invasion. They had been preparing for conflicts with every major species in the galaxy. In the secure communication room of the Confederation Council building, Ambassador Elena Vasquez received her daily intelligence briefings. The reports confirmed what she had expected. The alien species were finally beginning to understand the true scope of human operations. The Krex have discovered our military analysis files, reported Agent Thompson from the Krex homeworld. War Marshal Thakmor is reviewing documents that show we have been studying their weaknesses for over 20 years. Elena nodded calmly. Expected reaction time? He is going through the stages of realization now. Disbelief, anger, fear, and finally comprehension. Based on psychological profiling, he should reach the acceptance phase within 48 hours. Another agent reported from Zilani Space. The Trade Federation leadership is discovering the economic intelligence we have gathered. They are realizing that we know every detail of their financial operations, including the illegal ones they thought were completely secret. Elena made notes on her tablet. Any signs of organized resistance forming? Negative. The species are too shocked to coordinate any meaningful response. Also, our analysis of their economic dependencies shows that most of them cannot afford to break ties with humanity. They need our trade relationships more than we need theirs. The most important report came from Agent Park, stationed in the Hive Worlds. The Queens are beginning to understand the full scope of our intelligence network. They are realizing that we have been mapping their society from the inside out for generations. However, they are also recognizing something else. Which is, they are starting to understand that we use the same techniques to study the Devourers. The reason our fleets were so effective against the invasion is that we had already analyzed the threat and developed countermeasures. The galaxy is beginning to realize that our intelligence network saved them from complete destruction. Elena smiled. This was the crucial point in the plan. The alien species had to understand not just that humans were more dangerous than they had believed, but that human capabilities were the only thing standing between the galaxy and threats, like the Devourers. She activated her communication system and sent a message to Strategic Command on Earth. Phase 2, initiation successful. Target species are discovering the extent of human intelligence operations as planned. Shock and fear levels are within acceptable parameters. No organized resistance detected. Proceeding to Phase 3. Demonstration of protective capabilities. Elena looked out her window at the massive ships from different species that filled the space around Confederation Central. Once, these vessels had represented the military might of civilizations that saw humanity as insignificant. Now they looked small and vulnerable, like children's toys compared to the human fleets that were systematically destroying devourer forces throughout the galaxy. The alien species were learning that humans were not the peaceful mediators they had pretended to be. But they were also learning something else. In a galaxy full of predators, sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one you want on your side. Phase 3 would teach them exactly what that meant. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation was unlike any meeting in the organization's 1,000-year history. Representatives from every major species had gathered, but instead of the usual diplomatic courtesy, the atmosphere was thick with fear, anger, and desperate calculation. War Marshal Thakmor entered the council chamber with his full military escort, something that had never been allowed before. His red eyes swept the room, looking for threats that might have been hiding among the diplomatic staff for decades. How many of the translators, clerks, and maintenance workers were actually human intelligence agents? How many species had human spies embedded in their governments? We demand answers. Thakmor's voice boomed across the chamber as he pointed at Ambassador Elena Vasquez. You have been lying to us for 200 years. You have been spying on us, manipulating us, turning us against each other while pretending to make peace. Elena sat calmly in the human delegation area, her hands folded in her lap. She wore the same simple blue diplomatic uniform she had always worn. Her expression was the same polite, patient look that had convinced the galaxy she was harmless. But now everyone in the room saw something different when they looked at her. War Marshal, Elena said in her quiet voice, I understand you are upset, but perhaps we should discuss what has actually been accomplished during our time as mediators. Veltar, the Zilani representative, rippled with angry orange patterns. Accomplished? You have been stealing our secrets. You know every detail of our private business arrangements. You have violated every principle of diplomatic trust. Have we? Elena asked. In the past 200 years, how many wars has this galaxy experienced? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. Before humans joined the Confederation, this galaxy was in constant warfare, Elena continued. The Kreks were expanding their empire through conquest. The Zilani were using economic warfare to dominate smaller species. The Hive Queens were consuming entire systems to feed their growing populations. In the 1,000 years before human involvement, over 3 billion sentient beings died in interspecies conflicts. She stood up slowly. In the 200 years since humans became mediators, how many died in wars between Confederation members? Again, silence. 0. Elena answered her own question. Not one life lost to warfare between species who trusted human mediation. We did not achieve this through lies and manipulation. We achieved this through understanding. Queen Zisht's mandibles clicked angrily. Understanding? You call spying understanding? Yes, Elena said simply. To truly make peace, you must understand what each side really wants, what they really fear, what they are really capable of doing. Surface diplomacy deals with what people say they want. Real diplomacy deals with what they actually need. She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy's current state. Green areas indicated stable, peaceful regions. Red areas showed ongoing conflicts or threats. Look at your territories, Elena said. Every species in this room controls more space, has more resources, and enjoys more security than you did before human mediation. The Kreks Empire has grown by 40% through negotiated expansion rather than costly military conquest. The Zilani Trade Federation has tripled its profits through agreements we helped broker. Even the hive worlds have found ways to grow their populations without consuming other species. War Marshal Thakmor slammed his fist on the table. You achieved this through deception. We achieved this, Elena said, her voice becoming harder, by making sure we understood exactly what each species needed to feel secure. The Kreks needed to feel strong and respected. The Zilani needed economic growth and stability. The hives needed resources for their expanding populations. We found ways for everyone to get what they needed without taking it from each other. She touched a control, and the display changed to show military threat assessments. But we also understood something else. We understood that this galaxy contained threats that would eventually destroy all of you if you continued fighting among yourselves. The display showed the Devourer invasion routes and the devastation they had caused in other galaxies. 3 days ago, an extragalactic force invaded our territory. Within hours, they had destroyed military forces that took your species centuries to build. The proud Krex fleet lasted 18 minutes. Zilani defense systems collapsed in 22 minutes. Hive military swarms were consumed within an hour. Elena looked around the room. If the galaxy had still been divided into warring factions, if your fleets had been scattered across a dozen different conflicts, if your resources had been depleted by constant fighting, what would have happened when the Devourers arrived? Silence stretched for long minutes. Everyone knew the answer to that question too. You would all be dead, Elena said quietly. Every species in this room would have been consumed by creatures that view entire civilizations as food. The only reason any of you are alive to accuse us of deception is because human deception kept you united and strong enough to survive. Builder Prime Resta's crystal form flickered with confused colors. But why the secrecy? Why not tell us about these threats? Why not share your technology and military capabilities? Elena smiled, and for the first time in 2 centuries it was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of a predator who had successfully protected her territory. Because you would never have accepted protection from a species you considered inferior. The mighty Krex accepting military aid from weak little humans? The Advanced Architectural Council taking defensive advice from primitive Earth-dwellers? You would have laughed at us and continued your wars until the real threats arrived to destroy you. She gestured to the display showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. Instead, we became indispensable in ways you did not recognize as military. We positioned our colonies and research stations and cultural centers exactly where they needed to be to provide early warning and defensive coordination. We built relationships that would let us respond instantly to threats. We gathered intelligence that would let us protect you even when you would not protect yourselves. War Marshal Thakmor was staring at the tactical display with growing understanding. The embassy on Krex Prime, the research station in the Vega system, the cultural exchange on the Hive worlds, they were all military positions. They were all defensive positions, Elena corrected. Every human facility in Galaxy was built to protect the species living nearby. Your embassy? It can coordinate the defense of your entire homeworld. The research station? It monitors 3 different invasion routes and can summon human fleets. Within hours. The cultural center on the Hive worlds? It contains enough medical supplies and evacuation equipment to save 10 million Hive citizens. She turned to address the entire chamber. You are angry that we deceived you. But ask yourselves this. Would you rather be angry and alive or honest and dead? Queen Zisith spoke first. The Devourers. They are not finished, are they? Elena shook her head. The force that invaded our galaxy was a scouting expedition. Analysis of their technology suggests the main Devourer fleet is approximately 50 times larger. They will return when they realize their scouts have been destroyed. The chamber erupted in panicked voices as representatives from every species began demanding to know what could be done, how they could defend themselves, whether evacuation was possible. Elena held up her hand and the room fell silent again. Even now, even after everything they had learned, the galaxy still turned to humans for answers in a crisis. The good news, Elena said, is that we have been preparing for this possibility for over a century. Human strategic planning does not focus on single threats. We plan for the worst-case scenarios and build capabilities to handle them. She activated another display showing human fleet deployments and construction projects throughout the galaxy. Every species in this room has been unknowingly participating in the construction of the largest defensive network in galactic history. Every trade agreement included materials for strategic construction projects. Every cultural exchange program trained local populations in emergency procedures. Every peace treaty established command structures that can coordinate defensive operations. War Marshal Thakmor studied the display with professional interest. This is impressive, but do you really believe it will be enough to stop a force 50 times larger than what we just barely defeated? Elena looked at him directly. War Marshal, you have spent your entire life believing that the Krex were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Today you learned that humans have been planning for threats you never imagined while appearing to be harmless mediators. Do you really want to bet against human strategic capabilities again? The War Marshal was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. It was not a happy laugh, but it was not entirely bitter either. "You magnificent, terrifying creatures," he said finally. "You spent 2 centuries making us dependent on you while building the tools to save us from ourselves, and now you are asking us to trust you again." Elena nodded. "Yes, that is exactly what we are asking." Around the table, representatives from every species looked at each other with new understanding. They were no longer the independent powers they had believed themselves to be. 2 years after what historians would call the Devourer War, Elena Vasquez walked through the orbital gardens of New Geneva, humanity's new diplomatic capital. The massive space station hung in orbit around Earth like a crystal flower, its transparent walls offering views of the blue-green world below. The garden paths were filled with representatives from across the galaxy, but the dynamic had changed completely from the old Confederation meetings. The Krex delegates walked respectfully behind. Their human escorts, Zilani traders, waited patiently for human approval of their business proposals. Even the proud Architectural Council sent their most junior members to these meetings, accepting that the important decisions were now made elsewhere. Elena paused, beside a fountain where water from a dozen different worlds mixed together in perfect harmony. The symbolism was not accidental. Nothing about New Geneva was accidental. "Director Vasquez," came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see War Marshal Takmor approaching with his usual escort of Krex warriors. But now the warriors wore modified armor that included human technology, and their weapons were human-designed energy weapons rather than their traditional plasma cannons. "War Marshal," Elena replied. "How are the joint training exercises proceeding?" Takmor's red eyes showed a mixture of respect and frustration that had become familiar over the past 2 years. "Your human tactics continue to challenge our traditional approaches to warfare. But I must admit, our forces are now 3 times more effective than they were under pure Krex military doctrine." This was the new reality of the galaxy. Species that cooperated with human strategic planning found themselves stronger, safer, and more prosperous than they had ever been. Those that resisted discovered that the galaxy had become a very dangerous place for them. The Orion Syndicate had learned this lesson the hard way. 6 months after the Devourer War, the criminal organization that controlled illegal trade routes throughout the Outer Rim had decided that humans were too distracted by reconstruction efforts to notice their activities. They had been wrong. Human response had been swift and devastating. Not through direct military action, but through economic pressure and strategic isolation. Within weeks, the Syndicate found their supply routes cut off, their financial networks frozen, and their political allies suddenly unwilling to take their calls. The few Syndicate leaders who survived the collapse now worked as low-level informants for human intelligence services. "The beauty of our approach," Elena had explained to her staff at the time, "is that we never had to fire a shot. We simply removed our protection and let the galaxy's natural forces handle the rest." Similar fates had befallen other groups that tested human patience. The separatist movement, which had tried to establish independent colonies outside human influence, discovered that their new homes were frequently visited by pirates, equipment failures, and mysterious shipping delays. Most had returned to Confederation space within a year, grateful for human protection and assistance. Elena continued her walk through the gardens, passing a group of young aliens who were participating in the new cultural integration program. These were the children of diplomatic families, sent to study on New Geneva for their education. Officially, they were learning about human culture and galactic history. Unofficially, they were being trained to think like humans, to understand human strategic approaches, and to serve as links between their species and human leadership when they returned home. "Ambassador Elena," called a cheerful voice. She turned to see Zixtal, a young hive queen who was part of the program. Unlike older hives who still struggled with the new galactic order, Zixtal had adapted quickly to human ways of thinking. "Hello, Zixtal," Elena replied. "How are your strategic analysis studies progressing?" "Wonderfully. Today we learned about the Kepler campaign during the Devourer War. The way human forces used misdirection and patience to trap 3 Devourer fleets was brilliant. I have been trying to apply similar thinking to hive resource management." Elena smiled. This was exactly what the program was designed to accomplish. In 1 generation, alien leaders who thought like humans would be running governments throughout the galaxy. They would make decisions that aligned with human interests because those approaches would seem natural and logical to them. That is excellent to hear. Remember, the key to strategic thinking is always considering long-term consequences, not just immediate results. As Zixtal rejoined her study group, Elena received a message on her personal communication device. The sender was Admiral Chen, whose fleets now maintain patrol routes throughout the galaxy. Director, we have detected unusual energy signatures in the Andromeda approach vector. Recommend immediate strategic consultation. Elena activated her reply system. On my way to command center. Alert the Council of Primary Threats we discussed? Negative. New contact profile. Unknown configuration. Elena's expression hardened, slightly. This was what humanity had been preparing for since the Devourer War ended. The galaxy was full of threats, and the Devourers had been just the beginning. She made her way to the central command complex of New Geneva, passing through security checkpoints that would have impressed the most paranoid Krex general. The command center itself was a marvel of integrated technology. Human strategic computers networked with architectural quantum processors, Zilani economic modeling systems, and Hive collective intelligence algorithms. Admiral Chen was waiting for her beside the main tactical display. Around them, officers from a dozen different species worked together with smooth efficiency. This was another change from the old galaxy. Military forces were no longer organized by species. They were organized by function, with the best qualified individuals serving in each role regardless of their biological origin. Show me what we are dealing with, Elena said. The display activated to show long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. Strange ships were approaching from another vector, entirely, not from the direction the Devourers had used. Analysis suggests a completely different technological base, Admiral Chen reported. These are not Devourer vessels. Energy signatures indicate possible artificial intelligence control rather than biological crews. Elena studied the data carefully. Time to contact? Approximately 6 months at current approach speed. Threat assessment? Unknown. But Director... Admiral Chen paused. Their approach pattern suggests they already know about our defensive positions. They are avoiding the sensor networks we established after the Devourer War. Elena was quiet, for several minutes analyzing the implications. Another alien threat, possibly more advanced than the Devourers, and they had intelligence about human defensive preparations. Initiate Contingency Protocol 7, she ordered. All fleet commanders to report for strategic briefing within 48 hours. Begin civilian population security assessments. And Admiral? Yes, Director. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them it is time for Phase 4. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. Yes, ma'am. Should I inform the Confederation Council? Elena considered this question carefully. The alien species had accepted human leadership during the Devourer crisis, but they still believed they understood the extent of human capabilities. They had no idea what Phase 4 actually meant. Not yet, she decided. Let them continue believing. They know what humanity is capable of. When the time comes, the revelation will be more effective. As Admiral Chen left to carry out her orders, Elena returned to the observation deck overlooking Earth. The blue world below looked peaceful and quiet just as it had for centuries, but she knew that beneath the surface, in hidden facilities that even most humans did not know about, preparations were being made for possibilities that would terrify even the species that had learned to fear human strategic thinking. The galaxy believed that humans were patient hunters who had spent 2 centuries preparing for threats like the Devourers. They were right, but they still did not understand the full scope of human patience. Humanity had not been preparing for decades or centuries. They had been preparing for millennia, since the first time their ancestors had looked up at the stars and wondered what might be looking back at them. Every species in the galaxy thought they understood what humans were capable of. The Krex believed humans were master strategists. The Zilani thought humans were economic manipulators. The Hives saw humans as patient planners who could think generations ahead. They were all correct, but they were also all thinking too small. Elena activated her personal communication system and sent a coded message to an address that existed nowhere in any galactic database. Deep protocol activation confirmed. Unknown contact approaching. From Andromeda sector. Estimated technological capability exceeds current galactic baseline by significant margin. Recommend transitioning from Phase 3 operations to Phase 4 strategic reveal. The galaxy will learn what human patience has really been building toward all these years. She ended the transmission and returned to her walk through the orbital gardens. Around her, representatives from dozens of species conducted the business of a galaxy that had learned to trust human judgment in all things. They believed they understood their place in the new order. Soon they would discover that the new order was much larger, much older, and much more carefully planned than any of them had imagined.